Why should we care about ESG in the supply chain at this time?
Nowadays, with climate change, social justice, and so forth, it's really impacting everyone on a personal level. And I think it's that personal impact that's really helping drive the change that we're seeing at corporate level, government level, and so forth. And for the supply chain professional or the procurement professional, I would also say that public and consumer demand, you could lump that with recruitment and hiring and retaining the best talent. Very similar types of demands. I was in Silicon Valley meeting with one of the world's largest data companies, and their procurement officer for indirect spend said to me, I didn't know anything about ESG. I don't really know a whole lot about sustainability, but I need to learn quickly because every person that I'm trying to hire wants to know what we're doing on it. So, that kind of gives you an idea of the recruitment class that we're coming into, supply chain professional position.
Just in terms of numbers, ESG globally across all CEOs is number 9 in the top 10 priorities of every CEO. Right? So number 9, above risk, just like quite a change from a few years ago. So this is, including, recruiting, including like revenue growth. ESG is number 9, right? It's, amazing, right? So all of us, we will, in some ways, our roles will be impacted by it. This was a recent McKinsey report. 2/3 of a company's ESG impact is dependent on your supply chain. So the folks here who are at the intersection of supply chain and ESG have the potential to make the most amount of impact for their companies. And I think, if I might argue, for their careers, because this is going to be massive. Every single company in the world is on a path to becoming carbon neutral, like net zero emissions. And Gartner hardly ever uses 100% of companies. They'll say most companies, and they'll sort of qualify it. This is the first time, one of the first time they've said 100% of the companies are on the path to becoming net zero, right? Time and again, what I hear from clients is, I need quality data, right? I need, and why is quality data so important? Because it is a contract that you have with your customers, with your employees, and with your sort of broader community, right? So so I think ESG sort of the data, if the data is not good, or you're not confident about the data, that raises many problems, right? So one, you're breaking this sort of explicit sometimes explicit, but sometimes implicit contract, right, with your most important stakeholders, right? But number two, I don't know if you've heard this term before, but greenwashing is the new money laundering, right? And I'm sort of hearing it more and more. So this is how important quality data is, because if the data is faulty, folks consider this greenwashing, which can be pretty bad because it breaks explicit and implicit contracts. And soon there'll be regulatory implications. Why is implementing ESG programs hard?
When you're looking at your supply chain, it's very opaque. If you're lucky, you have some good spend data. If you're luckier, you know exactly where your suppliers are located. Luckier still, you know what industry they're in, or it's categorized in a way that's uniform, and so on and so forth. That data quality issue, is something that a lot of the people on the call know is costly, and you invest a lot of time and energy in trying to make it as best quality as possible. And then you get into sustainability, and you're talking about what goes on behind closed doors. Now, you can scan internet websites and news sites and stuff to find out maybe if they're mentioned, and the greenwashing type of stuff might come out of that. You can tap into publicly listed databases and things, but when you're talking about your supply chain, you're thinking about maybe 80% of the volume or 90% of the volume with companies that aren't publicly listed. And many are in countries where English is not their first language. So, a lot of your scanning tools kind of fall flat. So we've found the best way to find out is you either go there in person or you do the next best thing, which is interact with them one-on-one and ask them to provide documented evidence of what they're doing. And luckily we have this methodology that enables us to be able to take that documented evidence, have sustainability professionals validate it and assess it and so forth, and have their scoring of that documentation roll up into an easy to understand scorecard which you can use. It's laborious and tedious for those who do it, but we're very, very grateful for the output because it means that we start to get a little bit more insight into what's actually happening within our supply chain.
So in my previous role, I was Chief Procurement Officer, I actually ran financial shared services. And over the last couple of years, one of the things became very obvious, and there was different articles that I read and some that I was actually interviewed for. Some of it would come down to RFPs, right? Like, so if someone wants to do business and buy from you, and they actually reach out to the procurement organization to find out how are we operating, because they're only allowed to do business with us if X, Y, and Z is the setup. The other thing was about employments. People don't want to come in the new world. They don't want to come to work for a company that doesn't have active goals, that isn't thinking about how are we going to approach this? How are we going to make a change, right? What is our status on this? Then there becomes the reality that this becomes a checkbox activity. So what that means is that without having the data and be able to actively look at the data, you set quotas and you have to meet those quotas. And so now at times, what you're doing at the end is you're filling checkboxes. We have to do this business because we said we would do this percentage of business this way, or we have to pivot here. And so that stops your, and this is something Jack and I like to say, your good business from being good business, right? By being able to take this data and actively look at it up front, I'm excited about being able to make good decisions, both from an ESG standpoint, but also that a CFO is going to be able to support, because he's going to understand that you were still able to do the appropriate amount of due diligence. Instead of this being a negative, it can be a positive that makes RFPs happen faster, because you can show evidence that you're working with, top citizen in the space, or however you want to phrase it, and have data to prove that this decision not only was the right one from a bottom line standpoint, but from a visibility standpoint on the market, how your customers are going to see you, how your employees are going to see you.
I think, Mark, what you said about the problem of, making it a part of your normal day-to-day process versus an end of the year or episodic checkbox activity, or like data collection activity, is probably the most important change that organizations need to make. And it's hard because, a lot of these processes are manual today. That's sort of, why I'm so excited about how the role that CERTA can play. So for those who don't know, CERTA is a end-to-end, life cycle management, supplier life cycle management software, right? So we manage everything from, onboarding to sort of risk mitigation to, integrating contracting into the flow, and then, sort of ongoing monitoring, right? So we do sort of all aspects of supply management and automate that. I'll just give you a quick example of how CERTA makes it super easy to embed EcoVadis, right? And other sort of, services into our mix, right? So this is CERTA. You can, all the things about buying. These are the dashboards. So I'll just sort of quickly orient you. This is, sort of the whole task flow. So I can, go into a company and see all the, sort of intake tasks, etc. But then, this is the studio where, you can configure your own sort of process in CERTA. And literally, as you can see, this is the intake form, and the procurement team has some approvals, and the third party comes and registers, and the security and privacy team, compliance team, etc. And let's see if we wanted to just embed ESG into it, right? So all we need to do is go to the templates, and we have multiple templates with all the category and source, right? And then if I basically just search for EcoVadis template, this is all you need to do. You pick it up, and then say, okay, I want EcoVadis to be a part of the third-party registration, right? So as they're filling out their profile, security and privacy information, I want them to sort of embed ESG into it, right? So this is like EcoVadis creating success. That's it. Now EcoVadis sort of is overall integration is a part of your ongoing process. So we really want to take the friction out of the process and make it super easy for you to embed ESG. So this we just showed you how sort of how easy it is to embed EcoVadis, but it's really, really easy now to embed all the different sort of initiatives into your regular sort of ongoing life cycle.
In the current world, if you're going from Series A to Series B, you're not going to have funding if you don't have ESG initiatives. Like the big firms, they're not investing in anyone that doesn't have this plan. I mean, we were laughing the other day, the biggest movie in the world, right, was Don't Look Up, which is a reference to this world, is a reference to how important this is, and people turning the other way and how that's not going to be accepted anymore. So I think it's just something that went from there was good actors and certain people wanted to be a part of it to now it is the agenda and you have to get on board.
The biggest challenge is really the data. So how do we get the data? Well, we need to tell the supplier to give us the data. Why are they going to give us the data? Well, they'll give us the data if there's a carrot, like an RFP we just talked about, or if it's genuinely part of doing business with us now. Okay, so let's say it's genuinely part of doing business. How do we make that change? What are the governance and resources that we have to have in place? If you don't have the right internal motivators and the right internal communication, what's going to happen? The first time that supplier gets asked for sustainability information, they'll pick up the phone, they'll talk to their buyer, and if the buyer says, I don't know what it is and I don't care, the supplier's not going to care and you've lost them. So for me, that in the weeds stuff, is a challenge. But if you take a step back, you realize, well, it's a challenge because leadership hadn't set the right expectations. It can't be something that's done from a helicopter. This needs to be a legitimate process change, culture change, and so forth. So this is how we present it to customers. Yeah, technically, we can have an integration with Certa. We could have an integration with Certa tomorrow. You could have a platform set up, it's plugged in, it's ready to go. Boom, let's do it. But if that invite goes out to the supplier and there's no weight on the end of it, if it's just greenwashing, if it's just we'd really, really like it for you to participate, but you don't really have to, well then we've lost them.
Right? Most companies in the world are not going to be able to do business with companies that aren't committed to sustainability. So as procurement professionals, I think my only sort of guidance and advice would be, to try to get ahead of the problem because one, I think that's what your company needs. And two, I think it's going to do wonders for your career overall, sort of having done this. One of the things that Certa is able to do even beyond the onboarding and the RFP is sort of ongoing awarding of projects, right? So this internal Yelp idea, right? Wherein, as your, for Certa's clients, as, sort of our clients look at companies and look at vendors, if you will, Certa can show their ESG rating, so their EcoVadis rating, their diversity profile, their security clearance and data security, data privacy clearance. So it makes it really easy for your business users to choose the right supplier. And that is a massive incentive for suppliers to be more eco-friendly and have their values aligned with yours, right? Because that's how they're getting more business. And also for you to meet your ESG goals, right? Because then you're just, creating this virtuous cycle of not only bringing in the best suppliers, right, who match your company's values, but then giving them more business if they're actually delivering on that promise.
Yeah, I think preparedness is good, right? So one of the things that you can do now is start thinking about what would be your preferred process for integrating sustainability into your workflows, or how your employees are recognized, or that sort of thing. That can be done without having the tools at hand. It's about your process. We integrate with lots of different systems, and the ones that we see most successful, by and large, are mature customers who have integrated into the process, not just the technology. It's great that you're all here. I mean, that is the first step, and your journey is going to be long and it doesn't end, because we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But as we carry on, it becomes business as usual, and that's really the goal for everybody, I think.
Just one last point. This is one of those topics too. Like, I know we've talked about all the business reasons and everything else behind it, but it's also one of the things that as leaders, we need to step into, right? We sit at home and we have our kids tell us, like, you shouldn't be using that plastic straw, you should be using this paper straw and these little things. But at the end of the day, corporations are responsible for 70% of what we're talking about when we talk about reducing these carbon emissions. We're in this unique position where we can hopefully drive good business and actually make changes that we want to see. So that's why I'm personally so incredibly passionate about this. So thanks again for everybody for joining us today.